What's going on, guys? Today we're gonna be talking about, well, one of the two things in Dungeons and Dragons, and it's not dungeons, so I wonder, it's fucking dragons. We're gonna be talking about dragons, and not Dragon D's nuts, the actual dragons, like the creatures. Anyway, um, we're just gonna be talking about five or six pretty cool dragons that I think are underutilized, and I want to shine some light on them and some of the things they can do and why I think they're cool. Yeah, I hope you enjoy, and let's jump right into it. First up, we actually have two different kinds of dragons that I'm kind of grouping them together because they're two sides of the same coin, but that being our solar dragons and our lunar dragons with which both came out in Spelljammer, which, while they were talked about, I haven't seen them used in many games, but they are fairly new. They are newish. Um so we actually have four variations from each, which is really great. We have all the way from Wormling going to Ancient. And just to give you guys a bit of what they look like, these are our little baby solar dragons. And then we also have some art for the Ancient dragons, which is very pretty. And then same thing here with our lunar dragon and then our big lunar dragon. Personally, I love the lunar dragons a little bit more. I'm not biased. Anyway, um, so I think just to get a good baseline, we're going to be talking about the adult solar dragon because what I tend to find is that most of the time in D&D games, since mid-level play is usually kind of the peak of most games, I find that either young or adult dragons are the most popular to see around the table. So for our adult solar dragon, we have an AC of 17, 2 hit points, 24 strength, 15 dex, 22 con, and they do have a 15 intelligence and a 16 wisdom and a 14 charisma. And one tip I always have to enhance your monsters is to actually play to how they would act with their mental stats, because an intelligent creature, when they're getting close to death, they're probably not going to stick around. They're going to want to leave. They're probably going to want to preserve their life unless they think that, that fight is winnable. But like, if the party is still looking well and like this dragon is dying, they're going to want to get the heck out of Dodge. Even a creature with a 15 intelligence, because that's still way above average, is going to be able to understand that. But maybe the dragon, they are really selfish or they're incredibly prideful. So maybe they don't want to leave. But instead, maybe they have, I don't know, you gave them an extra attack, but probably not these guys. These guys, they go crazy. Um so their CR is 14. They get a whole bunch of saving throws. They get some skills. They are immune to radiant damage, and they're also immune to the blinded condition. They have dark vision for 180 feet and they have a passive perception of 23. That's incredibly high. So if you're doing a group stealth check to try to sneak on this dragon, your players, they've got to roll higher than 23s. Now, if someone is passed without a trace, that may not be an issue, but like still, that's high. That's a high number. So the dragon has the flyby ability, so it doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it flies out of an enemy's reach. And then it has 2 legendary resistances, and it also has nebulous thoughts. So magical attempts to read the dragon's mind or glean its thoughts fail automatically, which is really cool. And then it does have siege monster, so it's double damage on attacks against objects or structures, and it doesn't need to breathe. So it has a normal multi-attack, it has a bite and a tail attack, and it also has a photonic breath weapon. So most dragons are known for their breath weapons, so this dragon exhales a flashing mote of radiant energy that travels to a point the dragon can see within 180 feet of itself, then blossoms into a 30-foot radius sphere centered on that point. Each creature in the sphere must make a DC 19 Constitution save taking 55 radiant damage on a failed save or half on a successful one. That's a lot of damage. It's almost like a delayed fireball, except it's radiant damage. That's kind of a cracked breath weapon. Like that's one of my favorites. It's very cool. So it also gets legendary actions, of course. So it gets Tail of Attack, and then it does also get Burst of Light, which costed it 2 actions. So it emits a magical light in a 30-foot radius, sphere centered on itself. And it's a DC 23 Wisdom save, or it's blinded until the end of their next turn, which is really cool, and it fits the Solar Dragon being this bright ray of sunshine. So let's just kind of read the first paragraph of the description here. It does give a brief overview of the dragon's lair as well at the bottom, but we're not going to be talking about that. So, a solar dragon is born in the heart of a star. It divides its time outside its lair between patrolling its territory and hunting for food. The dragon has a serpentine body and a pair of ventral limbs ending in long fins, nebulous wings that give off light, and gleaming multicolored scales. It can see clearly even in intensely bright light. Solar dragons are fond of treasure, just as all dragons are, but in the airless void of wild space, they value food even more. Solar dragons typically feed on Kindori, scavers, and other forms of space-dwelling wildlife. A solar dragon might mistake a distant spell-jamming ship for possible prey and come in range of the vessel's weapons before realizing its error and veering away. A wise or experienced captain won't take the dragon's approach as a sign of hostility. Solar dragons that are fired upon have been known to batter the offending ships to flinders. Flinders? I don't know what a flinder is. I don't know what that is, but that's okay. Solar dragons are territorial, carnivorous, and they behave accordingly. So I think that's really cool. There's a lot of flavor you could add them there, or you don't even have to make them from wild space, or the astral plane at all. You could do something where, like, maybe the sun is growing hotter in your world, and like your players have to find a way to dim the energy because maybe there's like a great solar dragon that lives in the sun, or I don't know, something dumb or cool like that. So for lunar dragons, they actually have a lower CR than solar dragons. While it's only by 1, it is a little lower, but I will say CR is busted and doesn't make any sense. So yeah. Because they do have a 17 AC with 172 hit points, a 22 strength, a 23 strength, a 12 dexterity, a 20 constitution, but they only have a 10 in intelligence, a 13 wisdom, and a 15 charisma. So they are a little bit, they're not quite as smart as solar dragons, so, you know, they might make some different decisions. And they do have less saving throws, but they are immune to cold damage. And they have dark vision for 240 feet instead of 180, and a passive perception of 21. And they only speak Draconic. So this dragon does also have 2 legendary resistances, and it has the Tunneler ability, which means that this dragon can burrow through solid rock at half its burrowing speed and leaves a 15-foot diameter tunnel in its wake, and that's really cool. It also doesn't need to breathe or require air to breathe. So it also has a bite attack, but this dragon, on top of having a bite and tail attack, also has a claw attack, where the solar dragon only had bite and tail. So, cold breath. The dragon exhales a blast of frost in a 60-foot cone. Each creature in the cone must make a DC 18 con save. On a failed save, the creature takes 36 cold damage, and its speed is reduced to 0 until the start of its next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage, and its speed isn't reduced. So, this is more of a normal breath weapon, however, it does... And the DC is a little bit lower than the Solar Dragon, but the speed being 0 could actually be very deadly for a lot of player characters. So, I would be careful about that. like, your players may have a way around this, definitely. But if they are frozen in place, that could be very deadly very quickly. So the Lunar Dragon also gets a bonus action called Phase, which it gets 3 times a day. And the dragon becomes partially incorporeal for as long as it maintains concentration on the effect, as if it's concentrating on a spell. And while partially incorporeal, the dragon has resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage. Very cool. Sucks for melee characters. I'm sorry. Go cry about it. And it does get legendary actions as well. So it does get a tail attack, and it also gets Treacherous Ice. Magical ice covers the ground in a 20-foot radius centered on a point the dragon can see within 120 feet of itself. The ice, which is difficult terrain for all creatures except lunar dragons, lasts for 10 minutes or until the dragon uses this legendary action again, which is very cool. With the Lunar Dragon lair, it's very cool because they do also have regional effects, so lunar dragons have a very unique lair because, it's like the moon, which is really cool. I love that. So for their description, lunar dragons are capricious, xenophobic creatures that make their lairs inside desolate moons by burying through the rock before laying eggs. A female lunar dragon stocks her lair with food. She won't leave her lair again until the eggs hatch and the offspring are old enough to fend for themselves. Lunar dragon eggs have stony shells that are pale white to light gray in color. Lunar dragons are alabaster white when they hatch and gradually turn darker as they age. Ancient moon dragons are the color of slate. Lunar dragons enjoy depriving other creatures of treasure more than acquiring the treasure themselves. Often found among the treasures in a lunar dragon's hoard are one or more spelljamming helms taken from vessels that dared invade the dragon's territory. A lunar dragon can become incorporeal, but not to the extent that it can pass through other creatures or solid objects. In the semi-incorporeal state, roughly half of the dragon's body has a dark, indistinctly spectral form, which is pretty cool. I think these guys are cool. Honestly, they would make great thieves. Maybe like a band of thieves actually befriends a lunar dragon and they steal other people's treasures together. Maybe even the party. The party can make a deal with the lunar dragon. Yeah, and very, very cool. I like them a lot. There's a lot of themes here. You could bring them into the material plane. You don't just have to have them in wild space or the astral sea. So yeah, let's move on to our next dragoon. I have one of my personal favorite dragons, the Deep Dragon. So this was a dragon that was in previous editions or very similar iterations of it, but it was added in Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, which I'm very excited about. I like it a lot. It's super cool. So here's kind of a little picture of it. And we do have the wormling, the young, the adult, and the ancient. But for our purposes, we are going to be going over the adult Deep Dragon just to kind of give us a baseline of what these guys can do. So they have an AC of 17, 147 hit points, and they do as well, they have a burrowing speed, a fly speed, a walking speed, and a swim speed. They have literally every speed that's like they can. It's just all of them. So they've got a 20 strength, 14 dex, 18 con, 16 intelligence, 16 wisdom, and 18 charisma. So these are actually the smartest dragons we have seen so far. 16 being well above average, getting into genius territory. So these guys are very smart. So I would not recommend that if you're going to have a deep dragon in your game, that you play them as just a raging monster that wants to kill things. You can certainly do that, but I think this guy is way more interesting. And you'll see why in a minute. So they have resistance to poison and psychic damage, and they're immune to the charmed, frightened, and poison conditions. They also have blind sight for 60 feet, and then dark vision for 150 feet, and a passive perception of 17. And they actually speak 3 languages here, being Common, Draconic, and Undercommon, with a CR of 11, also being the lowest CR we've seen so far from our dragon buddies. However, yet they're only a CR 11, but they have 3 legendary resistances a day, which may be very frustrating to your party, because while the Lunar and Solar Dragon only had 2 and were CR 13 and 14. This dragon does get a multi-attack as it has a bite, claw, and tail attack. However, it does have the change shape ability. So, this dragon magically transforms into any creature that is medium or small while retaining its game statistics other than its size. The transformation ends if the dragon is reduced to 0 hit points or uses its action. So this is very cool. This could make for a really great Underdark NPC, or a NPC that's infiltrating the party. I think there's a lot of cool things you can do with this. I love dragons that transform into humans. It is one of my favorite things. I love it so much. This dragon also has Nightmare Breath. So the dragon exhales a cloud of spores in a 60-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a DC 16 wisdom save. So this is the lowest saving throw we have seen so far. On a failed save, the creature takes 33 psychic damage, and it is frightened of the dragon for 1 minute. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage with no additional effects. A frightened creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on itself on a success, which is cool. I think being frightened of, a dragon that lives, like, in the Underdark and is just terrifying and can burrow, it's cool. I like it. And also could be like a hot sexy person like a second later. That's crazy. So we also do have legendary actions. So we have commanding spores, which means the dragon releases spores around a creature within 30 feet of it that it can see, and the target must succeed on a DC 16 wisdom save or use its reaction to make a melee weapon attack against a random creature within reach. If no creatures are within reach, or the target can't take a reaction, it takes 5 or 1d10 psychic damage. It's okay. It's okay. So, it can also make a tail attack as a legendary action, and it gets Spore Salvo, which costs 2 legendary actions. The dragon releases poisonous spores around a creature within 30 feet of it that it can see. The target must succeed on a DC 16 con save or take 17 poison damage and become poisoned for 1 minute. The poison creature can repeat the saving throw at the end of each of its turns, ending the effect on its success. So, paladins or monks would be really good against this dragon specifically. But it might pose like a fun challenge to the rest of the party or even creatures that are immune to fear. I think this dragon is really fun. It's flavorful. It doesn't have to be an antagonist, even though it's neutral evil. Maybe it needs the party to further some goals, or maybe, this dragon is trying to get creatures out of its territory. Maybe it needs the party's help. I think there's a lot of cool ways that you could do this, especially if you're running an Underdark themed campaign. It's a great way to include a dragon. All right, let's move on to our next one. A much lower CR dragon here, and we have the Dragon Army Dragonel. Here's a little picture of him, and he's large size and comes from the new Dragonlance books. So I just thought this dragon was cool, and I also thought it was a good player option potentially if your players are looking for a draconic mount. This is another great option because there were some cool options released in Fizzbins, but this one's newer, so I thought I would talk about it. So it's got an AC of 16 with breastplate barding, which I think is fun. 58 hit points, a 30-foot walking speed and 60-foot fly speed. So it's got a 16 strength, 15 dex, a 12 con, and 8 intelligence, 13 wisdom, and 10 charisma. So this is by far the dumbest dragon we have seen. However, it is still sentient, and that's what matters. So it has 1 skill being perception, and it is resistant to fire damage, which is nice. It's a very common damage type. It does have blind sight for 30 feet and 120 feet of dark vision and a passive perception of 13. And it understands common and draconic, but it cannot speak. So it's a CR 3 and a proficiency bonus of +2. And it doesn't have too many actions. This isn't a legendary creature or anything, but it's a fun, I think it's got enough actions to be a very fun mount for like a higher level player characters, and enough hit points that hopefully won't go down in one shot. Still very cool. Like it a lot. So it does have the flyby, which means the Dragonelle doesn't provoke opportunity attacks when it flies out of an enemy's reach, which is phenomenal. And it does have a multi-attack, meaning it can make 2 rend attacks, which are +5 to hit, and deal 2d6 +3 slashing damage and +1d6 fire damage, which is phenomenal. So, let's get into the description here. Dragonelles from the volcanic mountains surrounding Sanction are closely related to red dragons. Resembling them in scale, coloration, and general shape, they are cruel and selfish creatures trained by the dragon armies to serve as mounts for trusted officers. While they lack a red dragon's destructive breath, these dragonelles are inured to fire, and their vicious teeth and claws flare with embers, which I think is really cool. It's very flavorful. If you have a player that really likes red dragons or they want a dragon mount, I think this is a great answer to that. It's only a CR3, especially if your player is already higher level. You know, the druid can probably, shapeshift into wild shape into CR3 creatures if it's a moon druid. If not, fuck them, I guess. Anyway, so yeah, just a fun little guy. I like him a lot. Maybe it would also be a great dragon. Maybe you could use this as a baby dragon, or maybe it would be great for a villain NPC or to have as well, like an antagonist to have this as well. But yeah, so let's move on to our next dragon. We have the young red shadow dragon, which funny enough comes to us from the monster manual. And while this is the only stat block for shadow dragons available, this stat block and the description actually goes into how to create other kinds of shadow dragons, which are really cool. And one of the reasons I wanted to point this one out to you guys, because I love the Shadowfell, and I guess I should explain Shadow dragons are basically dragons that either hail from the Shadowfell or were dragons that chose to go to the Shadowfell or have been trapped in the Shadowfell for a long time, and it's basically transform them and transform their powers to more fit that death-like nature, that dark shadow nature, and I think they're very cool. One of my favorite dragon types. So they even have adventure hooks here as well, and, maybe connections. So I would definitely check this out if you're interested in making a shadow dragon, because you can make a shadow dragon from any type of dragon. It doesn't even have to be an evil dragon. What if there was a gold dragon that really wanted to explore extra dimensional planes, but somehow got stuck in the Shadowfell, and now you have this dark, like, almost like you could make them like a rust, like for metallic dragons, you could maybe make them feel almost rusted. And I think that's really cool. So yeah, maybe check that out if you're interested in creating a shadow dragon. But for our purposes, let's just go over the stat block available to us, that already comes to us from the monster manual, which is the young red shadow dragon. So this is based off of a young red dragon. So, and it's a CR13, and having a young dragon be a CR13, which is what a lot of adult dragons are, that's kind of crazy. That's holy hat tamales. He's a chonky boy. So we've got an AC of 18, hit points of 178, a normal speed of 40 feet, a climbing speed of 40 feet, and a flying speed of 80 feet. We have a 23 strength, 10 dexterity, a 21 constitution, 14 intelligence, 11 wisdom, and 19 charisma. That is a high charisma. This is a charismatic boy. So for saving throws, we have dex, con, wisdom, and charisma. And then skills are perception and stealth. So we also have resistance to necrotic damage from our time being in the Shadowfell, and immunity to fire damage, as well as blind sight, dark vision, and a passive perception of 18. So we speak common and draconic and we're a CR13 with a proficiency bonus of +5. And we have living shadow. While in dim light or darkness, the dragon has resistance to damage that isn't force, psychic, or radiant, which is that's so much damage. So it's basically that's a lot. I understand. Yeah, this thing is definitely worth being a CR 13. It might even be a little higher just based on that fact alone. Um, while in dim light or darkness, the dragon can take the hide action as a bonus action. Very cool, very reminiscent of sneaky rogues, which makes sense. But this dragon does have sunlight sensitivity, so it probably doesn't want to fight in the daylight. Because while in the sunlight, it has disadvantage on attack rolls as well as perception checks that rely on sight. So this dragon is probably going to be very careful about how it fights. It does have multi-attack and as well as a bite and claw attacks, and this dragon has shadow breath. So the dragon exhales a shadowy fire in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a DC 18 dex save, taking 56 necrotic damage on a failed save or half as much on a successful one. A humanoid reduced to 0 hit points by this damage dies, and an undead shadow rises from its corpse and acts immediately after the dragon. In the initiative count, the shadow is under the dragon's control. This is super cool, especially if you're a very tough DM. And while I may rule that, like, if the players can get to the undead player in time or their body and maybe cast Revivify, I think it would be cool to maybe never have that player, like, be the same or have them be some sort of, like, marked phenomenon on them or something has changed within them, after that experience. I think it's really cool. Or you could flavor it as that once they're killed by this dragon, they can't come back. Because their soul's like ripped out of their body and is now just like a shadowy husk. You could do that too. There's lots of cool things you could do with shadow dragons. They're so cool. They're like epic emo goth, road ragers. I don't know. They're cool. I like them a lot. They're edgy boys. I like my edgy boys. Okay, leave me alone. So for our description, shadow dragons are true dragons that were either born in the Shadowfell or transformed by years spent within its dimensional confines. Some shadow dragons embrace the Shadowfell for its bleak landscapes and desolation. Others seek to return to the material plane, hungry to spread the darkness and evil of the plane of shadow. So you also get things like dark portals, recast in shadow, and back in the world, which are all very cool abilities. Love this. Shadow dragons, I think they're super flavorful, especially if you're doing anything with like plane walking campaigns or anything with the Feywild or the Shadowfell. They're very cool. They're the best edgy boys. They're also super cool. So yeah, let's move on to our last dragoon. Hello. Do you know who it is? Do you know who this is? I know who this is. It's the fucking Jabberwock. One of the best dragons, if not the best, in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Look at him. He's so cute. Look at his little face. He's so cute. Oh my god. So this is a huge dragon that comes to us from the wild beyond the Witchlight. And the Jabberwock is kind of freaking epic. Look at this stat block. This guy's only a CR 13, but you'll see why in a minute. He actually does a lot of damage. Actually, he should maybe be, it depends on your party, honestly. I think CR 13 in some parties will be totally fine, but in others, it won't be not good at all. Like, if you have a bunch of power gamers at your table, it'll be fine, but if you just have, like, people that are playing D&D that aren't maximizing the characters, this might be a really tough fight, even for CR 13. So yeah. The Jabberwock is a huge dragon, I already said that, with an AC of 18, 115 hit points, 30-foot climb, 30-foot speed, fly of 60 feet, and a swim of 30 feet. So, it's got a 20 strength, 12 dex, 20 con, 4 intelligence. So this by far is the least smart dragon we have seen. He is unfortunately of all his dragon relatives, he is the he needs a little extra help sometimes, and that's okay. That's okay. He's got a wisdom of 7 and a charisma of 11. Oh my god, 711. Anyway, he does have proficiency in all saving throws, though, somehow. That's crazy. And perception of +8. And the only damage vulnerabilities this dragon has is slashing from a Vorpal sword, which is so interesting to me. Very, very specific. I haven't read the entirety of Wild Beyond the Witchlight, but maybe there's a reason for that. Damage immunity is immune to poison damage and immune to the Charmed, Frightened, and Poisoned condition. This dragon does have True Sight. This is one of the first this is the first dragon we've actually seen with True Sight. Who needs dark vision when you have True Sight? And a passive perception of 18. It does not speak any languages or know any languages, and that's a first as well for our dragons, not even being able to understand language, which is actually kind of crazy, because the majority of dragons are very smart, and I think that's kind of what sets the Jabberwock apart, other than its adorable appearance, is the fact that it's very much more animalistic-like compared to most other dragons. So it is CR 13 and a proficiency bonus of +5. And it has this funny little ability called Confusing Burble. The Jabberwock burbles to itself unless it is incapacitated. Any creature that starts its turn within 30 feet of it and is able to hear it the burbling must make a DC 18 charisma save. And on a failed save, the creature can't take reactions until the start of its next turn, and it rolls a d4 to determine what it does during its current turn, which is kind of insane. That's taking a lot of agency away from some players, especially if you have, like, a lot of players at your table with good charisma. So, I don't know. Personally, I would maybe lower this saving throw down to a 16, because that's really high, and this could make this creature very frustrating to go against. However, it's also super fun, so maybe don't. Especially if you want to make your players go crazy, because this thing is crazy. So 1 to 2, the creature does nothing, so it just has to stand there. 3, the creature does nothing except uses all its movement to go in a random direction. Hopefully there are no cliffs around. And 4, the creature either makes 1 melee attack against a random creature it can see, or does nothing if no visible creature is within its reach. So, already a huge challenge for melees, because they're going to be trying to be within 30 feet of this thing every turn. And it gets 3 legendary resistances a day. 3. It also has regeneration on top of the legendary resistances. So it regains 10 hit points at the start of its turn. If the Jabberwock takes slashing damage, this trait does not function at the start of its turn. Okay. If the Jabberwock takes slashing damage, this trait doesn't function at the start of its next turn. The Jabberwock dies only if it starts its turn with 0 hit points and doesn't regenerate. That's crazy. So it has to take slashing damage. So if you have a party that, like, maybe you've got a barbarian that only uses bludgeoning damage, and maybe a ranger and they're only piercing damage, then they could be in a lot of trouble, especially if they don't know. Like, it's really strange. It would be a really strange thing having to describe how this creature regenerates, except when the fighter you maybe uses a regular sword on it, which for some parties would be like, what? That's crazy. So I don't know. It's fun. I like it. This ability goes hard. It also has Uncanny Tracker. The Jabberwock can unerringly track any creature it has wounded in the last 24 hours, and it knows the distance and the direction to its quarry as long as 2 of them are in the same plane of existence, which is insane. So say if the Jabberwock is injured, and it has injured at least one person in the party, it leaves because it's feeling threatened, and it knows it's gonna die. It can go take a short rest, come back almost like fully healed, and maybe the party, it didn't think the Jabberwock was gonna come back, but it's gonna know exactly where they are. Even if it goes to sleep for an entire 8 hours, that's still within 24 hours, so it can go back, find them, and be like, haha, murder time, bitches. So it does also get a multi-attack, of course. It gets a rend attack and a tail attack, which is very cool. Now this is so cool because almost every other dragon has a breath weapon, but the Jabberwock gets laser eyes. Unless it is blinded, the Jabberwock emits a 120-foot long, 5-foot wide line of fire from its eyes. Each creature in that line must make a DC 18 Dex save, taking 31 fire damage on a failed save or half as much damage on a success, which is so cool. I don't know. I like that it's laser eyes. It's different than a breath weapon and it's fun. Also 120 foot long line. That's very long. Hopefully your party does not line up in a line. That would be really bad. It also has 3 legendary actions, being a tail attack, another rend attack, and a wing attack, which this one is kind of deadly. So the Jabberwock beats its wings. Each creature within 10 feet of it must make a DC 18 Dex save or take 8 bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. Prone, of course, being the really bad one, because if the Jabberwock saves the wing attack for right before its turn, it wing attacks, knocks the people around it prone, and then it's going to get advantage on attacking all the people around it, which would be really bad. You don't want that. I like this thing a lot. All right, let's read this the little description. A Jabberwock is a solitary, temperamental predator that haunts the pristine forests and ancient ruins. Accurate descriptions of Jabberwocks are difficult to come by because they are rare survivors of an encounter with one retain only confused impressions of its parts and not a sense of the whole. Pieced together, accounts describe it as a sinewy, dragon-like creature that walks on its hind legs as easily as it travels on all fours. Its eyes can emit fiery beams. Once a Jabberwock has chosen its target, it concentrates its attack on the target until the victim is killed and devoured. Until the Jabberwock is killed or until the target escapes using teleportation magic or other means. If a Jabberwock is slain, another creature appears 3D... If a Jabberwock is slain, another one appears 3d8 years later, materializing within 1,000 miles of where the old one perished. No immature Jabberwock has ever been sighted, and the creature does not appear to age. They're so cool. They're so weird. I love them. Also, another good point, with the Uncanny Tracker ability, if your party teleports, like if your party's in danger and they teleport away, the Jabberwock can find them. It can find them again. They can't escape unless they go to another plane, which they're probably not gonna be doing, because that's some high level shit, which is really cool. So this thing is really, really deadly. A lot of these dragons are, but most dragons are very deadly. I hope you guys enjoyed. That's the video for this week. I didn't have time to finish all the character builds. We'll probably finish those next week for the Gish, for the Charisma Gish, so probably expect that one next week. Anyway, I hope you all have an amazing and wonderful rest of your day and is filled with smiles. Don't forget to like and subscribe, but please subscribe. Thank you so much for your support on the channel and 150 subscribers. Let's keep going. Hell yeah. Subscribe, please. Bye!